Today, we're not talking about a war, we're talking about how one of the longest wars in history, the Cold War, ended without a shot being fired. This is the story of how Germany was reunified. November 9th, 1989. The Berlin Wall, for 28 years a brutal concrete manifestation of ideological division, was being transformed from a barrier into a climbing frame. Euphoric East Germans, their faces etched with disbelief and joy, poured through checkpoints, embraced Western strangers, and danced on the wall's hated spine. The world watched, mesmerized, as the symbol of the Cold War was rendered obsolete in a single chaotic night. Yet, for all the celebration, a profound and daunting question hung in the frosty air. What now? The division of Germany had been a fundamental fact of the post-war order, a stable, if tragic, constant. Its sudden, unexpected demise presented not a solution, but the ultimate geopolitical puzzle. The ground for this earthquake had been prepared not in Bonn or Berlin, but in Moscow. Mikhail Gorbachev, the General Secretary of the Soviet Union, had initiated his twin policies of glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring. He aimed to revitalize the stagnant Soviet system, not to dismantle its empire. Yet by loosening the ideological straitjacket and refusing to prop up Eastern European regimes with military force, the Brezhnev doctrine in reverse, he unleashed forces he could not control. The Soviet Empire, built on fear and dogma, began to crumble the moment the fear disappeared. In West Germany, the Basic Law's preamble had maintained the legal fiction of a single German nation, but by the 1980s, reunification was a distant dream, a rhetorical commitment for politicians and a quiet hope for families separated by the border. The West had built a prosperous democratic state fully integrated into Western Europe. Chancellor Helmut Kohl, a conservative from the Rhineland-Palatinate, was a historic romantic who believed in German unity, but even his advisors saw it as a generational project, not a matter of immediate policy. While the world focused on Gorbachev, a revolution was brewing from within. Starting in the summer of 1989, East Germans began voting with their feet, fleeing via newly opened borders in Hungary. Those who stayed took to the streets of Leipzig, Dresden, and East Berlin. Their Monday demonstrations began with a few hundred and swelled to hundreds of thousands. Their initial chant, "We are the people," was a demand for democracy within the GDR. It would soon morph into something far more radical. "We are one people." The end of the GDR came not with a bang, but with a bureaucratic stumble. On November 9th, Politburo member Günter Schabowski, unprepared for a press conference, fumbled through a new regulation on travel. When asked when it would take effect, he shrugged and said, "As far as I know, immediately, without delay." The news flashed across the airwaves. The border was open. Thousands of East Berliners descended on the checkpoints, overwhelming stunned border guards who, without clear orders and fearing a bloodbath, simply lifted the barriers. The wall was breached by accident and popular will. While others hesitated, Helmut Kohl acted with boldness and vision. Just 3 weeks after the fall of the wall, on November 28th, he presented a 10-point plan for German Confederation to the Bundestag, catching his own coalition, the opposition, and world powers by surprise. It was a masterstroke. The plan was vague on details but clear in its ultimate objective, the recreation of a single German state. Kohl understood that history had presented a window of opportunity that could slam shut at any moment. The prospect of a united, powerful Germany in the heart of Europe sent a chill through world capitals. In London, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher was openly hostile, fearing a resurgent dominant Germany would upset the European balance of power. In Paris, President François Mitterrand was deeply apprehensive, worried that German unity would come at the expense of European integration. The ghosts of 1914 and 1939 were not so easily banished. The initial global reaction was not joy but profound anxiety. The most critical and most resistant player was the Soviet Union. A united Germany and NATO was Gorbachev's ultimate red line. It would represent a catastrophic geopolitical defeat, the loss of the USSR's most crucial strategic buffer. For months, the Soviet position was an immovable niet. The entire project of reunification hinged on changing Moscow's mind, a task that seemed nearly impossible. As political talks stalled, reality on the ground accelerated. The East German economy was in a death spiral, its citizens continuing to leave for the West at a rate of 2,000 per day. To stop the hemorrhage, Kohl made a breathtaking unilateral decision. he would extend the West German Deutsche Mark to East Germany. This economic and monetary union in July 1990 was the de facto annexation of the GDR. It was a huge financial risk for West Germany, but it was the only way to give East Germans a tangible reason to stay and build a new life. To navigate the international minefield, a brilliant diplomatic framework was created, the 2+4 talks. The two were the Federal Republic of Germany and the German Democratic Republic, which would decide the internal aspects of unity. The four were the World War II Allied powers, the United States, Soviet Union, Britain and France, who would negotiate the external aspects, including security and borders. This structure gave the Germans agency while respecting the legal and security concerns of the victors of the Second World War. The key to breaking the Soviet impasse was a relentless campaign of assurance led by US Secretary of State James Baker and West German Foreign Minister Hans-Dietrich Genscher. They assured Gorbachev that a united Germany would be firmly anchored in a more deeply integrated Europe, what would become the Maastricht Treaty. They promised significant financial aid to the cash-strapped USSR. Most importantly, they offered groundbreaking military concessions. NATO structures would not be extended eastward into the former GDR territory, and the united Germany would reduce its armed forces. In July 1990, Helmut Kohl travelled to Gorbachev's dacha in the Caucasus. In a dramatic meeting, the two leaders reached a historic understanding. In exchange for Soviet approval for a united Germany and NATO, Kohl promised massive financial support, including billions in Deutschmarks to cover the cost of relocating Soviet troops and providing for their housing back in Russia. It was a blank cheque, but Kohl knew it was the price of history. The last, greatest obstacle to reunification had been removed. Internally, reunification was not a merger of equals, but an accession. The West German government used Article 23 of its Basic Law, which allowed other parts of Germany to accede. On October 3, 1990, the 5 re-established East German Länder, states, formally joined the Federal Republic of Germany. The GDR simply ceased to exist. This approach ensured a swift and orderly transition under the proven framework of West German law and institutions. As the legal formalities concluded, the true challenge began, uniting 16 million East Germans and 63 million West Germans. They were citizens of the same nation, but had lived in profoundly different societies for 2 generations. The Ossi, Easterner, and Wessi, Westerner stereotypes emerged overnight. The East Germans, proud of having overthrown their regime, suddenly felt like second-class citizens in their own country, their life experiences dismissed. The West Germans saw themselves as rescuers, often with a patronising air. The agency tasked with privatising the East German command economy was the Treuhandanstalt. Its mission was to sell off or liquidate over 8,000 state-owned enterprises. The result was an economic catastrophe. Most East German factories were obsolete and uncompetitive. The Treuhand presided over the deindustrialisation of the East, leading to mass unemployment on a scale not seen since the 1930s. The blooming landscapes Kohl had promised felt, for years, like a barren wasteland of shuttered factories and broken dreams. The unification process exposed the deep psychological wounds inflicted by the Stasi, the East German secret police. As its vast archives were opened, a chilling truth was revealed. The Stasi had employed nearly 100,000 full-time officers and over 200,000 informal collaborators, creating a society where neighbour spied on neighbour, and even husbands spied on wives. The process of reckoning with this pervasive betrayal would poison families and communities for decades. To pay for the monumental costs of modernisation, rebuilding infrastructure, cleaning up environmental disasters, funding pensions and unemployment, West Germans were asked to pay a solidarity surcharge solely on their income taxes. This massive transfer of wealth, totalling over 2 trillion euros to date, was a testament to the West's commitment to unity, but it also bred resentment, a sense that the lazy Ossis were a bottomless pit for their taxes. The physical landscape of the East was transformed. West German companies and investors descended, buying up property and launching massive construction projects. East city centres were gutted and rebuilt. The Plattenbau, the prefabricated concrete slab housing of the GDR, remained, but now stood in the shadow of gleaming glass towers and shopping malls that were carbon copies of those in the West. The visual homogenization was both a sign of progress and an erasure of a distinct Eastern identity. Long after the concrete was gone, a wall in the head, Mauer im Kopf, persisted. Easterners felt a sense of nostalgia, a nostalgia for the East, not for the Stasi, but for the social safety net, the sense of community, and the slower pace of life they had lost. Westerners grew tired of the endless financial transfers and the perceived ingratitude. The formal unity of 1990 had not yet created a shared, internal unity. For the world, German reunification was a stunning geopolitical triumph for the West. It was achieved entirely through peaceful diplomacy, without a single shot being fired. The united Germany, under Chancellor Kohl, doubled down on its European commitment, championing the Maastricht Treaty and the creation of the euro. This was the ultimate reassurance to its neighbours, a European Germany, not a German Europe. While Kohl, Gorbachev and Baker received the credit, the true architects of reunification were the ordinary citizens of East Germany, the protesters of Leipzig, the pastors who offered their churches as sanctuaries, the people who chanted "no violence" in the face of potential tanks. Their peaceful courage created the irreversible momentum that the statesman then had to manage. The man who made it all possible paid the highest personal price. Mikhail Gorbachev was hailed as a hero in the West but vilified as a traitor at home. The concessions he made on Germany, combined with the economic chaos, contributed directly to the hardline coup attempt in August 1991 and the ultimate collapse of the Soviet Union. His legacy is the ultimate paradox, the statesman who lost an empire to win the peace. Decades later, the process of inner unity remains a work in progress. While infrastructure in the East is now modern and gleaming, a significant economic gap persists. Pensions are lower, and political alienation is higher, reflected in the strong performance of the far-right alternative for Germany, AfD, in the eastern states. The feeling of being a second-class citizen has proven difficult to erase. Despite its flaws and ongoing challenges, German reunification stands as the world's foremost example of how to peacefully manage the dissolution of an empire and the unification of a divided nation. It demonstrated that with strategic diplomacy, political courage, and vast economic sacrifice, even the most intractable divisions could be overcome without war. The Germany of today is an unforeseen nation, the product of a chaotic, rapid, and largely unplanned process. It is a country that still grapples with its twin 20th century legacies, the Nazi past and the communist experience. This complex history has created a deep-seated culture of caution and a profound commitment to European peace and democracy. Walk through any town in the former East today, and the physical division is invisible. The divisions that remain are in the demographic charts, in the voting patterns, and in the subtle cultural differences that persist between East and West. The dream of complete unity has proven to be a longer, more complicated journey than anyone imagined on that euphoric night in 1989. The story of German reunification is ultimately a testament to the power of political will in the face of overwhelming odds. It was not inevitable. It was achieved because key individuals, Kohl, Gorbachev, Baker, Genscher, chose to ride the wave of history rather than be crushed by it. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 was a moment of pure unscripted joy. The reunification of Germany in 1990 was the arduous, complex, and often messy process of turning that moment into a lasting state. It was the day after the revolution, stretched out over years. 3 decades on, Germany is a global power, the anchor of Europe. Yet the project of reunification remains in many ways unfinished. The challenge is no longer merging 2 economies, but healing the psychological and social scars of division, a task that may take another generation. The final lesson of German reunification is that tearing down a wall is the easy part. The real work lies in dismantling the walls that people carry inside them, and in building bridges of understanding, respect, and shared identity across the chasm of a divided past. It's a continuous act of will, a permanent commitment to the idea that a people, once torn apart, can become one again.